If you're in a country like the United States, which is basically has an entitlement fixation that they alone should be entitled to the world's riches and that everyone else in the world should beg and scrimp at the feet of America, well, you're going to have a problem. And move now before prices here start getting out of hand and you won't be able to afford anything. The Sam Bankman-Fried story and FTX and FTT, which is their token, and Alameda, which is kind of the hedge fund, Alameda Research, that they created back in 2017. So Sam Bankman-Fried came out of a company called Jane Capital, and he comes from the very shadowy world, the very shady world of high-frequency trading and kind of the shadow banking system and the market making that's done kind of in a gray regulatory zone. And there's a lot of these firms that exist on the periphery. There's a lot of debate whether they're actually engaged in lawful activities or not. But that's where he came from. So he came out of Jane Capital. He started Alameda Research, which is another one of these market-making, high-frequency trading, arbitrage, chop shops that are very fringe in terms of whether they're legal or not legal. They exist kind of on the periphery. And he was engaged in a lot of skullduggery over there at Alameda. Then they decided to start their own exchange, FTX. And they lobbied very hard in the Bahamas, where they felt that they would get very little regulatory oversight. They went ahead and they bought 10% of IEX, which is another one of these shady peripheral exchanges, to give themselves regulatory legitimacy. They then floated a token called FTT, which is part of the whole scam token world that we've been talking about for a number of years, whether it's Ethereum or Cardano or FTT or XRP. These are just scam tokens. And he used that and listed it on other scammy exchanges to create a price, and then using that as collateral to buy assets like real estate in the Bahamas. And now, as all Ponzi schemes eventually do, they run out of kind of runway, and they crash and burn. So it is similar to Bernie Madoff in that respect. It's also similar to the 2008 financial crisis, where Wall Street spun out of thin air all these derivative contracts, and they created this multi-trillion-dollar Ponzi scheme that blew up finally in 2008, and with the help of the Fed and central banks to bail out all the crooked bankers once again. So there's a lot of similarities to that. There's similarities to the S&L crisis of the late 1970s, early 1980s. I should note that the S&L crisis, which is a similar crisis of using federal money to backstop a fraud, William K. Black, who was a regulator at the time, he put 1,000 bankers in jail. And we haven't seen anybody with that kind of rigorous regulatory oversight in 40 years. There hasn't been any rigorous financial oversight in the United States and around the world. And if you're not going to enforce laws, you're inviting these problems. So the regulators have really some answers that they need to fill in. And so it's kind of a continuation, Daniela, of multi-decade scammy fraud banking nightmare.
Right, not the first Ponzi scheme, not the last. What we saw with Madoff is regulation came in after Madoff. So do you blame the SEC partly for this fiasco, that they should have stepped in with regulation before?
Well, Danielle, there's lots of regulations, but you have to enforce the regulations. The SEC doesn't enforce the regulations. Now, one of the interesting things that have come out of all this is that you've got folks like the Ethereum Foundation and lobbying groups like Andreessen Horowitz and FTX really working the regulators in Washington. Their goal was to move all regulatory oversight from the SEC to the CFTC, where they felt that they had a more captured regulator. And that was the big goal of all of their regulatory malfeasance or bribery, or however you want to position that and talk about it. But that's been going on for a number of years. And to that end, the Silicon Valley scam coin fraudsters like Andreessen Horowitz with Solana, which is a scam, they're trying to move all oversight away from the SEC to the CFTC. So the regulators are clearly implicated. I would say it's part and parcel of a bigger picture where the U.S. economy is basically a kleptocracy at this point of scammy bankers, scammy politicians, the scammy media outlets.
And yet he's appearing on all the talk shows and whatnot. I mean, what do you make of his PR spin? Is he just a PR genius, or what's he doing?
Well, I think that there's going to be a price to pay for Sam Bankman-Fried. So it's clear that at the core of the issue is that he stole $8 billion from FTX investors, and he dumped it over at Alameda, and he lost it through reckless trading. And I think that that's a pretty clear case to be made. And we've recently seen his cohort, Caroline, co-founder. She's been spotted in New York City. It looks like she's cutting a deal.
I saw her in Soho.
Yeah, in Soho. It looks like she's going to cut a deal with the New York prosecutor to turn on Sam Bankman-Fried. So I think that he'll have his day in court, and he'll end up going to prison for a very long time, as he rightfully should. The media has grown extremely lazy in the United States. They gave up trying to report factually on what's happening around the world and in the financial markets long ago. So I know no one really expects or looks to the New York Times or the Washington Post to provide journalistic integrity anymore. That ship sailed long ago. We know that they're just cheerleaders for the kleptocracy. They do a good job at that. They get paid well to cheerlead the kleptocrats in Washington and Wall Street. And I don't think anyone really expects anything else from them.
Bitcoin has been thrown into the FTX disaster. People are lumping it all into one conversation. Let's talk about the damage done to Bitcoin.
No damage. The network has never been healthier. The network has never been stronger. Bitcoin, first and foremost, is a network. Network stability over price stability. And Bitcoin was something that was discovered in 2008. It was dropped onto the web in 2009. It has extremely interesting properties. One of those properties is that when prices are down, it attracts a lot of critics, and it attracts a lot of attacks, which could then fuel the conviction of the people who are actually investing in the network. Investments in the Bitcoin network have never been higher. That means the security has never been higher, and price will take care of itself. So like Tim, the VC, Tim Draper, reiterated his $250,000 call for Bitcoin in 2023. I concur with that entirely. Don't worry, the price will take care of itself. What we want to make sure is that the network is stable, and this Sam Bankman-Fried scandal never touched the network. The network is still TikTok next block. There's no problem. And the amount of money being poured into the network, that is into the hash rate, into the mining, into the security, has never been higher. It's running at 240 quintillion hashes per second, or calculations per second, which is an all-time high, close to an all-time high. And I think that Bitcoin is a wily beast, and sometimes I think it just likes to drop in value to pull out the scammers, to pull out the Mashinskis and the Kevin O'Learys and the Mike Novogratz. The scammers out there, they get exposed and then they get wiped out, and then they won't have any money to buy Bitcoin.
Well, he's talking about a change in beliefs and system and the way people spend money and how women shop as to being a game changer.
Yeah, in countries like El Salvador, in less than a year, the entire nation understands what sound money and hard money is all about. The awareness of Bitcoin is almost 100%. Usage is at 20%. It's growing all the time, and it happened pretty quickly. And the economy is up, as I said, 10.3% GDP, and the numbers look fantastic. They're going to report, right now the estimate for El Salvador GDP is 2.8%. But based on what I've seen on the preliminary data, it looks like it's going to be 12%, Daniela. It's going to blow the doors off. It's going to be the fastest growing country in the world. Why? Because of Bitcoin. Because Bitcoin is an amazing transformation, and it can happen very, very quickly. You know, when the printing press came around, things happened quickly. When people, you know, Thomas Edison was hacking away trying to figure out how to make a light bulb work for years, tried thousands of different materials for the filament, then suddenly figured it out, and within 2 years, you know, we went from gas lights to electric lights. So when things change like this, they happen very, very quickly. If you're in a country like the United States, which is basically has an entitlement fixation that they alone should be entitled to the world's riches and that everyone else in the world should beg and scrimp at the feet of America, well, you're going to have a problem, because the axis of power and the pendulum of power is swinging away from the dollar and the fiat money world. It's a new century. It's a new world, Daniela. So again, if you're unhappy in the United States, I suggest you move, and move now before prices here start getting out of hand and you won't be able to afford anything. In America, it's become a free money kind of proto-communist dictatorship and a Politburo at the Federal Open Market Committee and a scandalous kleptocracy. It makes the Soviet Union look good by comparison over there in the United States, I must say. So if you want to talk to people who love freedom, liberty, property, and pursuit of happiness, they're in El Salvador. It's happening here because the idea found a place to grow here in the jungle in Central America.
So you left
the asphalt in the United States killed that idea. So yeah, I've been in the United States for 300 years, but now I'm in the new world, El Salvador.
So you sold your house in the States, you're gone, you're out.
I have several houses all over the world, Daniela, but I live here and I do my work here and I live here and I identify as a Salvadoran. I'm transitioning, Daniela. I'm transitioning. I identify as a Salvadoran, and that's where I'm at. And it's gorgeous. It's 82 degrees, 35-degree humidity. I'm looking at a volcano right now in the distance, and the city of San Salvador is booming. Restaurants are opening up. Hotels are going up. The people are happy. The president cut violent crime down by 95%. That's like giving the population of 7 million people a $6 billion gift, because $6 billion in this $28 billion economy was being extorted every year by the gang.